In the previous sessions, we have been exploring the history of psychological thought. From the early structuralism and functionalism to behaviorism, psychoanalysis, and the cognitive revolution discussed in the last class, we have gained insights into various perspectives. However, you might wonder, what practical relevance do these views have for ordinary people? Indeed, whether through my daily observations or asking friends interested in psychology around me, a significant number often express the sentiment, I study psychology to solve my own psychological perplexities and make life happier. The various isms, delving into parameters, functions, and mechanisms all day long, can these truly make my life happier? If you resonate with this perspective, you might appreciate the school of thought I will introduce in this session, humanism, the final stop in our psychological journey. It also goes by a more resonant name today, positive psychology, frequently featured in best-selling books, talk shows, and TED Talks. The core idea is that psychological research should explore people's capacity for goodness and the pursuit of happiness. In simple terms, it aims to study how to help people live better and happier lives. Now, why do we discuss humanism instead of directly mentioning positive psychology? The term positive psychology emerged officially after Martin Seligman took on the role of president of the American Psychological Association in 1998. However, it is essentially a branch of humanism in today's psychological thought. Therefore, from the perspective of the history of psychological thought, I will stick with the term humanism. This class will introduce humanism from three aspects: the view of human nature, values, and methodology. What is the humanistic view of human nature? In plain language, it's treating people as people. To understand this, you first need to grasp what it means to not treat people as people. Let's imagine a scenario. Suppose a person comes from a humble background and faces financial constraints from childhood. How do you think their life will turn out? Given your understanding of various psychological theories, you might think, do they have suppressed desires that turn into the dark side of their personality? This is from the perspective of psychoanalysis. Could they develop frugal or even stingy habits due to their economic circumstances? This is a behaviorist perspective. Cognitive science might add that their cognitive processing patterns change, leading them to perceive a lack even when conditions improve. While these perspectives make sense, humanism believes that all these analyses objectify the person. If we treat them as a person, how would they behave? The only answer is, they will do what they want. Clearly, they will strive to improve themselves. The definition of good is subjective, determined by the individual. Therefore, they have the capability to make themselves better. This is not mere motivational talk but a humanistic perspective. People are not just subjects on paper or research objects in a lab, they are living beings with their own will and potential for change. Full respect for their individual will is the underlying logic of humanism. Abraham Maslow, a representative figure of humanism, the same Maslow who proposed the hierarchy of needs theory, introduced the concept of self-actualization. He likened people to seeds constantly absorbing nutrients from the environment, enhancing their talents and abilities, urging not to judge them with a fixed mindset. You might find this similar to functionalism discussed earlier, as both emphasize the growth and development of individuals. However, functionalism implies a certain passivity, suggesting that people change solely to adapt to their environment. In contrast, Maslow argued that the ultimate direction of human change is to break free from environmental constraints and achieve self-transcendence. For a person growing up in impoverished conditions, when their physiological and safety needs are unmet, they may express a craving for material possessions. Once these needs are fulfilled, they may have higher aspirations, such as taking care of their family, helping others, or engaging in more meaningful work. Like a seed pushing through the cracks in a rock, resiliently growing upward, we shouldn't only focus on its twisted appearance at a certain moment but recognize its continuous inner vitality. You can imagine the profound impact this view of human nature has on psychology. As a discipline, psychology initially assumed an expert position, using professional knowledge to judge and help people abandon evil and embrace goodness. Humanism argues that no professional intervention is necessary, people will change on their own. You might think this is a theoretical discourse that doesn't hold up in the real world. There are clearly people in the world who seem unambitious or willingly decline. How do we interpret such phenomena? This leads us to the second aspect, the values of humanism. The values of humanism can be summarized in two words: all good. Humanistic psychologists believe that any pursuit you have is good, it is a value you acknowledge, and others have no right to judge it as good or bad. Some may pursue success, while others may seek freedom and inner peace. From the humanistic perspective, regardless of the pursuit, everyone is in the process of self-actualization. To illustrate this point, let's return to Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs theory. He believed that people have different needs at different stages, starting with survival and safety needs, followed by social and esteem needs, and finally self-actualization. These needs, arranged like a pyramid, do not imply good or bad, they represent developmental stages. From the perspective of need fulfillment, everything a person does at every moment is meaningful. For example, a high school student who seemingly wastes time by arguing with parents, playing on the phone, and not studying may, from a humanistic perspective, be fulfilling the need for autonomy through resistance against parents. Once this need is met, they will naturally move on to higher values. Consider this: decades ago, in the early stages of urban development in China, public toilets equipped with toilet paper were surreptitiously taken home by people. You may criticize their moral character, but can you label them as irredeemably bad? From the humanistic perspective, they were actively addressing their needs. It's just that, at that stage, people were focused on the material sense of security. With economic development, priorities shift, and people naturally become more aware of etiquette. You see, today, such behavior has disappeared. In the eyes of humanists, there are no problems, and there's no need to define who is right or wrong. Each person is, in fact, moving towards improvement, they just have different needs at different stages and different definitions of good. How important is this viewpoint? It allows psychology to truly be impartial. Psychological research often carries hidden value judgments. For instance, when we say a person's learning, achievements, or marriage are influenced by their developmental experiences, we may not realize that such statements define what is normal and good psychological phenomena, implicitly suggesting what is abnormal and bad. Humanism, on the other hand, stands for each person's inherent psychological value, supporting the value of each individual's psychology. What you pursue is good, and if someone doesn't agree with your pursuit, that's fine too. You both can transition to higher levels of needs, given the right conditions. This brings us to the third aspect, the methodology of humanism. The other pioneer of humanistic psychology, Carl Rogers, was on par with Maslow as a prominent figure in humanism and one of the greatest psychologists of the 20th century, if not the greatest. He pioneered a new approach to psychotherapy called person-centered therapy, with the core element being unconditional positive regard, meaning expressing complete appreciation and acceptance for a person without conditions. In real life, appreciation is often conditional. For example, parents may only praise a child when they rank first in an exam. Rogers argued that such conditionally positive regard brings about anxiety. However, when a person feels that they are good and worthy of love regardless of their actions, they can focus more on self-actualization. Rogers applied this philosophy to psychotherapy, appreciating clients and accepting all their feelings, even those defined by themselves or society as problematic. Some might worry that accepting flaws without conditions could lead to indulgence and worsen the problems. Rogers demonstrated through extensive therapeutic practice that humanism's core assumption holds true: people are always in a process of upward development. He shared a classic case study about a child with strange and difficult-to-control behavior. Rogers discovered that the mother was excessively critical, and the child's behavioral issues seemed linked to her. By giving unconditional positive regard to the mother, she gained more self-acceptance, which increased her acceptance of the child, and the problematic behaviors gradually disappeared. Rogers' practices had a revolutionary impact on the entire counseling industry. Today's counselors refer to their clients as visitors, originating from Rogers. Before him, they were universally called patients, implying an unequal relationship where the expert held a superior position. The shift in terminology represents a different understanding of the nature of psychological counseling, the expert being superior and the patient being inferior. Visitors implies that psychological counseling is similar to legal or financial consultation, where one buys a service, and the other provides it, fostering a completely equal relationship. This perspective not only liberated the clients but also the professionals. Psychologists no longer needed to be smarter or more profound than ordinary people. Instead, they provide equal companionship and sometimes uplifting support. Rogers believed that, at times, he didn't know how a person could become better, but he trusted that the person knew. Providing unconditional trust was enough. In summary, humanism focuses on human potential in its view of human nature, treats all pursuits as valuable in its values, and employs a person-centered approach in its methodology. If you feel overwhelmed by the numerous schools and find it challenging to navigate the subject, don't worry. The previous discussions were historical. In the next class, we'll provide an overview and get acquainted with the current state of psychology.